The monitors beeped in a rhythm I still hear sometimes when I'm trying to fall asleep. Slow, steady, indifferent. My son was in a federal holding cell 2 states away. His wife was at a real estate agent's office, signing papers on the house they'd bought together 7 years ago. I know this because I was sitting in the parking lot of that office, watching her walk out with a folder tucked under her arm and a smile I recognized, the kind of smile you wear when a problem is finally getting solved. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a criminal defense attorney in Louisville, Kentucky. I have sat across from people who did terrible things and argued for their freedom anyway, because that is the job, and because I still believe, that the system only works when everyone in it gets a fair fight. My name is not important. What matters is that I know how evidence is built. I know how it disappears. And I knew, standing in that parking lot with the September air turning cold around me, that my son's wife was doing something she needed to finish before he got out. His name is Joel. He was 34 when this started. He worked in commercial insurance, not glamorous. He wore the same 3 ties in rotation. He called me every Sunday at 6, without fail, even after he moved to Cincinnati with her. Her name is Lydia. I will tell you everything about Lydia, but not yet. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday night in March. It was my son's attorney, not me. I couldn't represent him. Obvious reasons. A young man named Stuart, who I had mentored briefly and trusted enough. Mr. He started and then stopped. They arrested Joel this afternoon. Financial fraud, wire transfer violations, falsifying insurance claims, federal charges. I sat down on the kitchen floor. I don't know why the floor. I just sat there on the tile next to the refrigerator, and he kept talking and I kept listening, and the words federal charges kept bouncing off the walls of my skull. Here's what they said Joel did. Over 18 months, he had allegedly redirected settlement payments from 3 commercial insurance clients, small businesses, 2 restaurants, and a dry cleaning chain into a shell account, then moved the money offshore. Total amount $340,000. The paper trail led directly to his work email, his login credentials, and an account in his name at a credit union in Columbus. I knew my son. I had watched him agonize over a parking ticket because he hated the idea of doing something wrong. This was not Joel, but federal cases don't care what fathers know. I flew to Cincinnati the next morning. Lydia met me at the door of their house. The house that was apparently already on the market, though I didn't know that yet, wearing a look of careful, practiced sadness. She hugged me. She said things like, "I just can't believe it, and I'm trying to hold it together for both of us." She made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table, and I watched her move around that kitchen, and something in my chest started doing what it always did in depositions, when a witness was performing instead of remembering. I stayed in Cincinnati. I told Lydia I needed to be close to the proceedings. She said, of course, and gave me the guest room and went on performing. Stuart and I met twice that week. The evidence against Joel was tight. Too tight, in a way that bothered me. Everything had Joel's digital fingerprints, but nothing had his physical presence. No witnesses placing him at the credit union. No phone calls to the offshore account contacts. No explanation for why a man making $94,000 a year with no debt and a fully funded 401k would need to steal $340,000. I started asking questions the way I used to ask questions, when I still believed a case could be cracked open if you just found the right seam. The shell account had been open 14 months before the arrest. I got the date from Stuart, then I got something else. The account required a notarized signature at opening. The credit union was in Columbus, 40 miles from Cincinnati. I asked Joel through Stuart whether he had ever been to that credit union. He said no. I asked if he'd ever been to Columbus on a Tuesday in August 2 years ago, the date the account was opened. He thought about it for 3 days. Then he said yes. He and Lydia had gone to a wedding in Columbus that weekend. He remembered because he'd gotten food poisoning at the reception. I asked Stuart to request the notarization records from the credit union. Routine discovery request, nothing alarming. It took 11 days. The notary's name was a woman who worked at a UPS store on Broad Street in Columbus. Standard enough. I drove to Columbus on a Wednesday, and I walked into that UPS store and I asked to speak with her. She had moved on, different location now. A manager told me. He gave me nothing else, but I noticed he said moved on, the way people say it when the departure wasn't entirely voluntary. I found her through the state notary registry. Her name was Beverly. She was working at a FedEx Now in Westerville. I drove there. I want to be precise about what I did and didn't do here, because it matters. I am a retired attorney. I am not a private investigator. I did not record our conversation without consent. I walked in, I told her I was the father of the man whose name appeared on a notarized document she'd processed, and I asked if she remembered the transaction. She went very still. I said, "I'm not here to cause you any trouble. I just need to understand what happened." She looked at the door. Then she looked back at me. She said, "The woman who came in said it was her husband. She had his ID." I nodded slowly, the way you learn to nod in depositions. The way that says, "Keep talking." She was Beverly paused, organized. She had everything ready. I processed it. It looked right. I didn't have any reason to she stopped. I've thought about it since, when I saw the news. I asked her one question. Would you recognize her if you saw her again? She said yes. I drove back to Cincinnati. I did not tell Lydia what I had found. I went to the guest room and I sat on the edge of the bed and I thought about the 18 months this had taken to build. The shell account. The login credentials. How do you get someone's login credentials? How do you get someone's login credentials? You live with them. You watch them type. You note where they keep things. I thought about the 3 Sundays in the past year when Joel had mentioned, briefly, that Lydia had seemed distant. Checked out. He'd shrugged it off, the way people shrug off things they don't want to look at directly. I thought about the life insurance policy. I found it in my son's documents. He had given me power of attorney before the arrest, so I had legal access to their financial records. Standard whole life policy, taken out 4 years ago, $750,000. Joel was the insured. Lydia was the insured. Lydia was the sole beneficiary. Nothing unusual about any of that, except that a conviction for federal financial fraud would not pay out. A man in federal prison, still alive, costs money, not earns it. But a man who committed fraud and then, under the strain of it, died. That was a different matter. I am not saying she planned to kill my son. I am saying that I sat with that policy in my hands for a long time, and I thought about all the shapes a plan can take when it's still flexible. There was also the matter of the house. I had discovered by then, through the county recorder's online portal, which is public record, that the house had been listed 9 days after Joel's arrest. Not weeks, days. And the listing price was $40,000 below market. Someone who wanted to sell fast. I called Stewart. I told him what I had. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "If you're right, we need to move carefully. Defense attorneys can't bring this kind of thing to federal prosecutors without it looking like a Hail Mary, but if someone else brought it." I understood. I called a woman I had known for 20 years. A forensic accountant in Indianapolis who had worked the other side of many cases I'd tried. Her name is not relevant. What matters is that she owed me nothing and had no stake in any of this, which is exactly why her opinion would matter. I sent her the financial records, the shell account timeline, the life insurance policy, the listing date on the house. I asked her to tell me what she saw. She called me back in 4 days. She said, this account was funded in increments that matched the payout schedule from Joel's company's 3 affected clients almost exactly. But the timing is slightly off in a way that's interesting. The money was redirected before the claims were officially processed. Whoever did this had access to the claims pipeline before Joel would have, at his authorization level. She paused. Does his wife work in insurance? Lydia had worked in commercial insurance claims processing for 6 years at a different firm before she left to become a freelance consultant, her phrase, around the time she and Joel married. She had the knowledge. She had the access through Joel's credentials. She had set up the account in Columbus on a weekend when she knew exactly where Joel had been and could account for him being elsewhere. A wedding, food poisoning, a dozen witnesses. I thought about how long she had been planning this. I thought about my son calling me every Sunday at 6. The notary, Beverly, agreed to give a sworn statement to a private attorney Stewart retained for exactly this purpose. Not to Joel's defense team directly, but to an independent fact-finding counsel, a procedural approach that kept everything clean and admissible. Beverly's statement described the woman who had presented Joel's ID. She described her height, her hair, a specific detail. A ring on the right hand. Unusual setting. Sapphire center stone. I had seen that ring on Lydia's right hand the morning she opened the door and said, "I just can't believe it," and made me coffee. Stewart brought everything. The forensic accountant's analysis. Beverly's statement. The timeline discrepancy in the claims pipeline. The accelerated home sale. To a federal public corruption unit contact he had in the Southern District of Ohio. Not as Joel's defense attorney making an argument, as a concerned citizen with documented evidence of a potential third-party perpetration of federal wire fraud. I want to tell you this happened fast after that. It didn't. It took 4 more months. 4 months of Lydia living in the house she hadn't managed to sell yet. The listing had stalled, which I believe frustrated her plans considerably. 4 months of me in the guest room, being careful, being polite, watching. 4 months of Joel in a federal holding facility in Lexington, frightened in a way I had never seen my son frightened, which is a thing a parent carries. During those 4 months, I found 2 more things. The first was a storage unit. Lydia paid for it in cash. I found the key in a coat pocket when I was legally going through financial documents she'd left in the shared home office. The unit was registered to a name I didn't recognize, a woman's name. But the address on file was our house, and the email on the rental agreement was a variation of Lydia's name with numbers at the end. The kind of email people make for things they want to keep separate. I did not open the storage unit. I am not in law enforcement. But I documented the key and the registration and gave it to Stewart's contact. The second thing was a phone. Not Lydia's regular phone. A second phone. A prepaid, which I found charging behind a box of books in the guest closet late one night when I was looking for a power strip. I did not look through it. I photographed its existence and the number visible on the back, and I put it back exactly where it was. I want to be specific about this, because it is important. I never broke a law during those 4 months. I was a house guest with legal power of attorney over the household's financial documents. Everything I found was either in plain sight, in public records, or given to me voluntarily. I had spent 31 years watching cases fall apart because someone got impatient and crossed a line. I was not going to let that happen to my son. The federal investigators executed a search warrant on the house on a Thursday morning in January. Lydia was home. I was not. Stewart had quietly suggested I find somewhere else to be that day, and I drove to Lexington and sat in a parking garage across from the federal facility where Joel was held, and I stared at the building and waited. The storage unit contained records, printed financial records, account documentation, and, this is the detail that still makes me grip whatever I'm holding, a handwritten ledger. Lydia had kept a handwritten ledger of the transactions, dates, amounts, account movements. I don't know if she kept it because she needed to track it or because some part of her needed it to be real, to be concrete. I only know what the investigators told Stewart, who told me. The prepaid phone had messages. I was not told the content specifically, but I was told there was a contact, a man, not from Cincinnati, who had been involved in the offshore account management. They found him 3 weeks later. The charges against Joel were formally dropped on a Wednesday in late February. I know the exact time because I was standing in the hallway outside the hearing room when Stewart came out and said it, and I had to put my hand against the wall. Joel walked out of the Lexington facility on a Friday morning. He had lost 19 pounds. He had a beard I'd never seen on him before. He stood there in the parking lot, in the clothes he'd been wearing when they arrested him, which no longer fit properly, and he looked at me for a long moment, and then he said, "Dad," and I said, "I know," because there wasn't anything else. Lydia was arrested the same week. The charges: wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. The man on the prepaid phone was charged separately. The house, the one she'd been trying to sell, went to Joel in the eventual settlement because it had been purchased jointly with marital funds that the court later determined she'd been systematically diverting. He sold it. He didn't want to live there. He lives in Louisville now, 20 minutes from me. He still calls on Sundays at 6. He sounds more like himself each week. A little more solid. A little less like a man still listening for doors opening. People ask me, when I tell pieces of this story, what the moment was. The moment I knew. I tell them the truth. It was the coffee, not something dramatic. She handed me that coffee the morning after my son's arrest, and her hand was completely steady. No tremor, no hesitation. And I thought, I know what people's hands do when they've just had the worst news of their lives. I've sat across from enough people in enough rooms. Her hand was steady because the news wasn't a shock to her. The news was the plan, arriving on schedule. I think about the people who don't have what I have. 30 years of knowing how evidence works, knowing who to call, knowing how to wait without breaking. I think about my son if I had been someone else. If I had just been a father with no particular knowledge, watching from a distance, trusting the system to find what I found. The system didn't find it. I found it. And then I handed it to the system carefully, piece by piece, and let it do what it's built to do. I want to believe the system works. I spent 31 years betting on that belief. But I know now, more than I did before, that the system works best when someone who understands it is paying close attention. Joel starts at a new firm next month. He's not going back to insurance. He's working with a non-profit that does financial literacy education for first-generation college students. He seems, when he talks about it, like a person who has found the exact right place for whatever this last year turned him into. I'm not going to tell you I've forgiven Lydia. That's not where I am. Maybe I'll get there. What I can tell you is that I no longer spend time being angry, because anger is a thing that moves forward, and I have found I prefer to stay still for a while. Drink my coffee. Wait for Sunday at 6. Some losses you don't get back. But sometimes, and I say this knowing how rare it is, sometimes the thing that was taken is returned to you, and you get to stand in a parking lot in Lexington, Kentucky in the February cold, watching your son walk towards you, and for one moment, everything that happened to get there falls away, and there's just that. He said, I knew you'd figure it out. I said, I knew you didn't do it. We stood there in the parking lot for a while. The sky was doing that thing. February skies do in Kentucky, gray and flat and going on forever. Neither of us was in any hurry. I'd been asked a few times since this ended whether I feel like justice was served. It's a reasonable question. I spent 31 years in courtrooms and I still don't have a clean answer for it. What I know is this. Lydia made her choices over a long period of time, deliberately, with full knowledge of what those choices would cost my son. She didn't make one bad decision in a moment of weakness. She planned. She built something piece by piece. The account, the credentials, the alibi, the timeline. And she executed it with the kind of patience that requires a person to look at someone they once promised to love and decide that person is acceptable collateral damage. That takes a particular kind of character. Or the absence of one. And the thing about that kind of planning is that it requires you to believe you're smarter than everyone around you. That's where it always comes apart. Not because the universe punishes arrogance. I don't believe in that kind of accounting. It comes apart because arrogance makes you sloppy in ways you can't see. Lydia kept a handwritten ledger. She used a prepaid phone she stored 20 feet from where I was sleeping. She sold the house 9 days after the arrest because she was in a hurry she couldn't afford to be in. She believed that a grieving, helpless father-in-law would be easy to wait out. She was wrong about what I was. I think about Beverly, the notary, who had processed that document 2 years before I walked into her FedEx and asked her a quiet question. She had thought about it since the news, she told me. Something had sat with her. She didn't have to talk to me. She had nothing to gain and something to lose. Her professional reputation, the discomfort of being involved. She talked to me anyway because she is the kind of person who, when something doesn't sit right, doesn't let it go. That quality, the refusal to look away from a thing that troubles you, is underrated. It saved my son as much as anything I did. Joel is the third piece of this. He spent months in a federal holding facility for something he didn't do. He had every reason to come out of that hardened, closed-off, angry in a way that poisons a person slowly. He didn't. I watch him now. The way he talks about the students he works with at the nonprofit, the patience he has with people who are navigating systems designed to confuse them, and I think that what happened to him didn't break something. It clarified something. He knows now, in the way you can only know through experience, what it costs when no one is paying attention. So he pays attention. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that everything happens for a reason or that suffering is secretly a gift. I don't believe that. What I believe is that how a person moves through something hard is a choice, made over and over, and that the choices accumulate into a life. Lydia made her choices. Beverly made hers. Joel made his. I made mine. We are all, in the end, the sum of what we chose to do when it would have been easier to do otherwise. The Sunday calls still come. 6 o'clock, without fail. Last week, he told me he'd helped a student untangle a financial aid error that had been following her for 2 years. He sounded the way he used to sound before all of this. Like a person who finds genuine satisfaction in doing a thing right. I sat in my kitchen and I listened and I thought, there it is. That's what you were protecting. That's what made it worth every careful, quiet step.